Alright everybody, we're hopping into another Dokkan tutorial video here today. Today I'm going to be going over a guide to difficult content in Dokkan. I've been getting this request a lot, especially during the 8th anniversary as we've been getting a lot of new players into the game. You know, a lot of people say, you make decisions in this game that I wouldn't even think about, and a lot of it just comes from my own personal experience playing the game. But what we're going to get into today is we're going to go over what are the different types of end-game content in Dokkan, or at least what do I think are end-game content activities, what abilities work best across all the modes. So, it's like whenever a new unit comes out, how do you evaluate them? How do you look at a unit and say, okay, they have abilities that are going to be good across all game modes, so, that's a unit that I should invest in. What units work best in the shorter content? That's going to be your Super Battle Roads, Extreme Super Battle Road. We'll get into that. What works best in long-form content? That's going to be more of your legendary style events. And then, just in general, how do you actually approach that difficult content? It's pretty easy to identify it, but how do you actually approach it? What do you need to do? What do you need to do with your account to get it into a spot to approach those things? And then finally, we're going to go over what items should you bring into events. So, give me a second, and we're going to go ahead and hop into this. Alright, so first up, I want to go over what are the different actual types of end-game content, or at least what do I consider end-game content. So that's going to be your Super Battle Road and your Extreme Super Battle Road. Okay, so that's going to be this event right here, and then Extreme Super Battle Road, I believe, is a little further down. Sadly, right now, they kind of have difficult content mixed in with like Dokkan events and all these other contents. So finding these things can be a little bit tricky. So they're not really in any order. They're just kind of slapped into this challenge tab and they're just put in here. So we have Super Battle Road and Extreme Super Battle Road. This was kind of the first original end-game content in Dokkan, and it still can be a little bit tricky today. The nice thing about Super Battle Road and Extreme Super Battle Road is that you have access to all of your item slots. So if I was just to hop in here real quick and just to show you, we'll just pick a random stage. You can see right down here, we have access to all 4 support items, and we have the support memories. So that is the nice thing about Super Battle Road. We'll get into kind of the specifics about it here in a minute, but that's just one thing I wanted to point out. Next up, we do have the legendary events. We scrolled over those a second ago. So we have the GT Legendary Goku event, the Legendary Vegeta event, and then somewhere up here should be the Legendary Goku event. I'm not sure where that is at the moment. Maybe it's just like way further down. Maybe it's the other direction. There it is, right there. So there's the Fighting Legend or Legendary Goku event. It just kind of depends on when... everyone refers to this as Legendary Goku event, or if you ever see anybody abbreviate just LGE, that's Legendary Goku event. So that's what this is right here. These are more long-form style of content. I think if we hop in here, it'll show us that, he has multiple phases here. So he starts out in base form, then Super Saiyan 2, 3, God, Blue, UI, and then Mastered UI, for a total of 8 phases. So you can see these fights are meant to go on for a little bit longer and, are going to be more in line with just building your units up over time. Next up, we have Infinite Dragon Ball History, which is kind of a branch on the legendary events. They're very similar in many aspects in that it's the same sort of long-form content that you see out of there. So that's right here, Infinite Dragon Ball History. You'll see people often abbreviate this as IDBH. For Infinite Dragon Ball History. Also for Super Battle Road and Extreme Super Battle Road, people abbreviate those as SBR and ESBR. So I think it's kind of important to help learn these abbreviations, because they people use them a lot, right? So it's just good to get that knowledge in. And then we have Battlefield as well, or Ultimate Clash. I always put a guide up on this, or I don't know if I'd really call it a guide. I call it a guide, but it's not really a guide. I just run through the event every time a new one drops. But I do consider this in-game content, considering the number of characters that you have to compete in here. I mean, it takes, I don't know how many, it takes 7 times 10. It takes like 70 units minimal to beat this event. I mean, assuming that you're not just bringing Cybermen in. So, I do consider this in-game content, just because of the amount of characters that it takes. And then, last up, we do have the Red Zone, and then we do have a few other events that I'll just kind of mention. But the Red Zone style content is the other main style of content out right now. So if I scroll down, let's see, where's Red Zone? There it is. So we have multiple Red Zones right now. We have the Red Ribbon Army, we have the Wicked Bloodline, the movies, and the GT edition for Red Zone. These all have multiple stages, and they're kind of a hybrid between long and short events. They're typically not going to be as long as the other long events, but they're going to be a little bit longer than Battlefield or Extreme Super Battle Road. These are going to be on average maybe 5 to 8 turns depending on the stage, whereas the Legendary Goku event can easily, well, back in the day whenever it was like really tough, you know, it could easily go on for, you know, 8 to 12 turns or more. So typically these events don't last as long. That's kind of why they're kind of like a hybrid event. And then we do have a couple of miscellaneous other events in here that typically kind of fall into the Red Zone styles, like this Wishes Backfire Birth of the Shadow Dragons. I would consider this a Red Zone style of event because it's kind of a hybrid. It's a little bit longer than short events, and then it's a little bit you know, it's a little bit longer than short events and a little bit shorter than long events. And specifically like Sin Shenron, who I think is the toughest fight in here, you know, he really is like he pretty much is a Red Zone stage. So the rest of these aren't really super crazy. It's really just this guy who's like a big tough boss in here at the moment. But eventually they will add a stage 8 to this that does have Omega Shenron in it. And he's pretty much just like Sin, but he hits a little bit harder and his typings are different. So, but overall the same concept applies to Omega as it does to Sin. So next up, I want to touch on what works best across all game modes. You know, what abilities do you want to be looking for on characters that are going to work well in all of the styles of events that I just mentioned? So I want to bring up the golden boy right here. Tech Ultimate Gohan. This guy is infamous in the community. He is 3 years old as of like August 2nd or something like that. Like, this guy is now 3 years old, and he is still a prime unit to use in multiple events, and I'll show you why. So right here on his super attack effect, he is greatly raising attack and defense every single time he super attacks. This is a multi-turn stack. You can notice here that it doesn't specify a turn, so he's just going to keep raising this as fights go on. So that makes him really good for long events. You know, typically in long events, you want to be stacking, you want to be, you know, raising your attack, you want to be outpacing the enemy, you want to be getting stronger as that fight goes on, and Gohan does that. And then for short events, one thing that works really well, and it also works well in long events, right? That's kind of like the point of this section, is what works well in both styles of events. The first thing I want to talk about is guard. Guard is one of these things. Right here, guards all attacks. You can see this guy's passive. I mean, it looks 3 years old, right? Like only 4 lines. But this guy is still one of the best options that you can bring across every event in the game right now because of his combo of guard and stacking that he has. So stacking is more of a long event ability. It's not going to help you too much in short events, but Gohan is greatly stacking, which means that it's going to be at a faster pace than normal stacking. I believe it's at 40%, which is pretty much double, you know, if you're normal stacking. Like, if he was just regularly stacking attack and defense, I don't think it would have lasted as long as he has, because that would only give him a 20% attack and defense buff every time he attacks, whereas the great stat gives him 40%, so he's just able to, you know, he can maybe take a little bit of damage at beginning of events now, but after you get maybe 2 attacks in, I mean, this guy's solid pretty much for the rest of the events, so that's kind of what has allowed him to stay relevant, though, is the guard. It's both of those things working in tandem. Like, if he didn't have the greatly stacking, he wouldn't, you know, be very good. And then if he didn't have the guard, he wouldn't be good at all. Like, if he was just greatly stacking and didn't have the guard, nobody would be using this guy just because he wouldn't stack up defense fast enough. But guard is one of those ageless abilities that allows units to last longer than they should. Another good example is Int Janemba. Int Janemba here is really old, and he's finally aged out, but this guy was able to live well past his heyday because he had a mix of 2 things: guard and dodging. Dodging is another thing that I want to touch on. Dodging is the most powerful ability that you can do in the game. Why is that? Let's say you have a team of 7 units, right, that have a 100% chance to dodge, and they each do just like a million damage on a super attack, right? Not much. So they're just, you know, gonna chip away at the boss forever. But they all have a 100% chance to dodge. You cannot lose. It is impossible for you to lose if all of your characters have a 100% chance to dodge. Just in theory, right? I mean, you can't do that. But just in theory, right? If all of your characters had 100% chance to dodge, you could not lose because you can't take damage. If you can't take damage, you can't lose, right? So that's why dodge is just one of these ageless abilities. You get a character like AGL UI Goku, who's 2 years old now, but he's still red zone viable, and people still get a lot of use out of him because he has a 70% chance to dodge in his passive, which means 70% of the time or more, if you give him more dodge, he's not going to get hit. And if he's not getting hit, he's not taking damage and you're not losing, right? So it's just one of those abilities that's timeless, dodge is. And as long as you're going into an event where dodge isn't canceled, you're going to be able to take advantage of that. There are a few events that I do want to talk about that do cancel dodge, specifically the legendary events, all 3 of them, the GT, the original, and the Vegeta event. Their final phases, all 3 cancel dodge. You cannot dodge against the final phase, but you can dodge in every phase up to that. And usually, you can get through those phases pretty quickly, so as long as you can hide your dodging characters, once you get to that phase, they're going to be able to help you all the way up to that point. And then in Super Battle Road, again, it's the same thing. You know, those are typically shorter style of events, and you can dodge. You can do a lot of stuff in those events. But if you can dodge, again, you cannot die. That's what makes dodge so powerful. And then another character, one more that I want to point out that's just been very ageless over the years, is this Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta. This guy, he came out forever ago. He's one of the first Dokkan Fests they ever put in the game, and people still get a ton of use out of this guy because he has really high damage reduction. So right here, I mean, look at this passive. It's literally 3 lines. He reduces damage received by 80% though for 10 turns. So this guy has just been like a Super Battle Road king because in combo with that, he also has a high chance to stun. So even though this character's really old, people still get a lot of value out of him because really high damage reduction does not age. Same thing with Golden Frieza. If I pull up the AGL Golden Frieza, the TUR, right here, this guy has 90% damage reduction as long as your HP is above 40% health. I mean, this guy's really old. He easy-A'd several years ago now, and people are still getting a ton of value out of this guy, as long as he's not banned in an event, because he is a nuking leader, right? So occasionally, if an event comes out and it only has 1 phase, they will ban the nuking leaders because they don't want you to just go in there, like, nuke the boss and leave. They want you to actually have to attempt the event. That's why the Wishes Backfire event bans nuking leaders, is because they have several phases that are just against 1 enemy. Same with the God of Destruction event. The God of Destruction event is another in-game event that I didn't really mention. It's kind of like, it's basically like a Super Battle Road stage in that it's like very short content, but it's only up against 1 boss. So it's kind of like a hybrid between, it's just kind of like an advanced version of Super Battle Road is what I would call it. So whereas Super Battle Road, you're going to have like 3 shorter fights like that are separated. Imagine that the God event is just like, I mean, it's basically like a Super Battle Road fight that only has 1 stage and it has more health, right? So that's kind of how you can think about the God event. And it is a good source of stones. It was a difficult content 2 years ago now. It came out with the 6th anniversary. I guess I can go ahead and show it while I'm talking about it. We're going off on a small tangent here. I'm a little off script, but the God event is still decently tough if you're a new player. But if you're good in, like, the red zone, you're going to be good in the God event. So it's just not one of those things I really need to touch on too much. Kind of like the Fearsome Activation Cell Max event. Like, I don't really need to talk about this. You know, this kind of just falls into the red zone content umbrella. Whenever I talk about red zone content, I'm going to be talking about the Birth of the Shadow Dragons event, this event, kind of the God event a little bit. The God event's kind of like a hybrid, like I said, between red zone and Super Battle Road. But I would say this kind of falls under that red zone umbrella. So, well, this is that event. It's still pretty tough, especially because you only have 3 attempts per day. So, you know, if you go in there and you just happen to get caught 3 times, then, you know, you lose. But this isn't too bad, right? But they do ban nuking leaders because pretty much all of these fights are just 1 phase. So they don't want you to come in here with, like, Frieza and then have, like, some crazy super-powered AGL unit on your team and just, you know, pop 2 nuking items and wipe the boss away. They don't want you to do that. So they do limit their usage. But if they're not limiting their usage, you know, that Golden Frieza is a great option. So to summarize, I think the 3 best abilities that you can have on a character are Guard, Damage Reduction, and Dodge. Those are just like the timeless abilities. You start seeing those getting put on characters and you go, okay, that's going to be a great character. Like, for example, this guy, he was in my top 10 TURs, right? He guards for 6 turns. Vegeta and Trunks, they guard for 5 turns and always in slot 1. Piccolo, Orange Piccolo, he was in my top 3. He has guard. The LR Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta and GT Goku, the 8th anniversary unit, right? They have damage reduction that they build up. This guy has guard. So you can just see that in my... I can go ahead and pull up my top 10 list real quick, just to show you guys what I'm talking about. Alright, sorry about this, it's maybe a little cramped here for you guys, but this is my top 10 LR list that I did, right? And I just, you know, to point this out, this unit has damage reduction, she has damage reduction and guard, he has damage reduction and guard, he has some damage reduction and guard, they have guard, he has guard, they have dodging, this guy has damage reduction, you have guard, so, and then this unit can have damage reduction and guard in their standby phase. So you can see, whenever I'm talking about guard, damage reduction, and dodge, my top 10 LRs right now are just filled up with units that do that. And that's really the make or break point for some of these units like LR Cooler, right? Where I don't even consider him in the top 10 because he doesn't have any of those abilities. He's just a raw damage dealer. And that's not to say he can't be good in these events, but that's just to say these units are always going to out-age units like Cooler who come out. You know, they'll have their flash in the pan, they look really good, but then as time goes on, they don't have any survivability. So as power creep keeps going up and up and up, they just fall off a lot faster because they don't have these techniques that allow them to survive. You know, that's why, again, Tech Gohan has been able to just hang on because he has guard and stacking. So this, not him, this guy has just been able to live well past his expiration date. You know, no other unit, I mean, STR Cooler, like, came out after this guy, right? No, I'm sorry. This guy came out after STR Cooler. Cooler got his EZA, and then this guy is still out-aging him, right? Like, that was always the big thing between this guy and the EZA. I should show you who I'm talking about in case you're new and you don't know. But, that Gohan, it was always, like, a big controversy was he better than this guy, you know? Like, was this guy better? And this guy, you know, stacked offense, and he was a support, and people really liked this unit for a long time. And it took forever to get them to say, like, oh, okay, you know, Tech Gohan has finally out-aged this guy. And about the time people were finally starting to accept that, they EZA'd this guy and made him stack defense. And there for a while, everyone was, like, really high on this guy and the Cooler team. And then, you know, lo and behold, the Omega event comes out, and, you know, some of these offensive units like this guy start to fall off again. And Gohan is still one of the best choices that you can choose for these long events because he's guarding and stacking. So it's just... those are abilities that are timeless. Occasionally, you'll get a unit that has guard that is not super great. A good example is the Great Ape Vegeta. Not this guy. Right here. This LR Great Ape Vegeta. They gave him guard, but they didn't really give him much else. Guard alone, like, can't save a unit, like, permanently. It'll give them some survivability. Like, this guy, you can use him, and it's allowed him to age just a little bit better than the STR Kaioken Goku who came out with him, just because that Kaioken Goku, again, is just a raw offense unit. He doesn't really have any special abilities, and this unit right here, you know, has, he has a lot more survivability, so, just because he has that guard, right, so, anyway, so that kind of covers it. So again, just what abilities work best across all modes, just to summarize again, is guard, damage reduction, and dodge. Those are the abilities that you want to be looking out for on characters, and that's not to say, you know, if you bring a character without guard, damage reduction, or dodge, that's not to say that you can't be successful with them. That's just to say that whenever you see a unit with those abilities, keep them in mind, because they're probably, you know, some of the stronger units that you can bring. Alright, so, next thing I want to talk about is short content. Let's talk about a little bit more in depth on short content. That's going to be our Super Battle Roads, probably Battlefield and Extreme Super Battle Road, that style of content. Maybe a little bit of the God event. But specifically whenever people refer... Can I please close this? Oh my goodness. But whenever people refer to short content, what they're typically referring to is Super Battle Road, Extreme Super Battle Road, and Battlefield. And I typically refer to these events as Blitz-style events. These are events that are going to be making... Like, you're going to be completing these stages in about 1 to 3 turns. If you're making it past turn 3, you're probably building your team wrong, or you're just trying to play really safe. And, yeah, but that leaves you open to being exposed more. You want to get in, you want to wipe these guys out as fast as you can, and then you want to move on with your life. So what works best for short content? Specifically, I'm going to be talking about Super Battle Road and Extreme Super Battle Road here. Both, like, everything I talk about here will be applicable to both of these stages. Some of this will be applicable to Battlefield as well, but for Battlefield, what you really need to do is hop into Battlefield, right? And you need to read the stage info. So, like, if you click on Turles here, you need to see what he is immune to and what he is not immune to before you hop into the stage. This is very, very important, because sometimes you'll see here, you know, he's immune to being stunned, he's immune to attack and defense lowering, but he's not immune to being sealed. Notice how we don't see sealed on here anywhere? That means you can seal this guy. So whenever you're team building, you should go, oh, I need to bring characters that have a sealing super attack effect or sealing in their passive. That way, I can make it through this event a lot easier, right? If you're able to lock down a character's ability to super attack, then they can't really do damage to you. I mean, some bosses will be able to do damage to you with normals, but a lot of bosses, the way they chip you down is through their super attack effects. So if they can't super, then you're going to have a lot more survivability against these bosses. So that's the best tip that I can give for Battlefield, is really take the time to read these and see what you can actually do to this boss. Again, this Lord Slug, he can be sealed. This Android 13, he can also be sealed. So that's just one of those things where it's like, okay, now that I know they can be sealed, what characters can I bring that have sealing effects that are going to really be able to lock down these bosses? And if you can keep one on each rotation in Battlefield, then they just can't ever super you. And usually you can make it through at that point, so that's just something to keep in mind for Battlefield. But the same applies for Extreme Super Battle Road and Super Battle Road. All of these enemies in these events are going to be susceptible to stunning, sealing, attack lowering, and just any other status effect that you can think of. But those are the three main ones. The only one that really other exists is like defense lowering. The defense lowering isn't really a big deal. So, but yeah, stunning, sealing, and attack lowering are going to be your main options in these Super Battle Road stages. A good example of this, if I can find the Ginyu Force stage, give me a second and I'll hop into that. Alright, so here we go. We have my team that I used. This is the Planet Namek Saga. This is good enough. But I used the Ginyu Force team in order to clear this stage for a couple of reasons. One, we can bring Raccoon and Goldo, who, again, guard in slot 1 whenever there's a Ginyu on the team. So we have Ginyu, or I guess on rotation specifically. But, you know, they have some high start-of-turn stats. They're going to have guard right here. It's guaranteed guard. Guards all attacks right here. And a high chance of stunning when there's a Ginyu. And then on their actual super attack effect here, they greatly lower attack and defense. I think they also seal as well in here. Seals attacked enemy super attack effect, yeah. So they seal, they can stun, and they lower attack and defense and guard. This is like the perfect Super Battle Road unit right here. You put them in slot 1, they're able to absorb all of the attacks that you can take there, and then they super attack, and it's going to, you know, seal the enemy, possibly stun the enemy, and it's going to lower their attack. So it helps protect all of the other units on this rotation and potentially the next because of the attack lowering. So that's just like a really valuable unit that you want to use for Super Battle Road, is someone like this, who's lowering attack, who's sealing, who's stunning, who can handle slot 1. This is like the perfect example of a Super Battle Road unit right here. Coincidentally, they're also pretty good in Red Zone, just because they have that guard and some pretty high start-of-turn stats. But for Super Battle Road, I don't know that this unit is ever going to age out of Super Battle Road because of how powerful they are. Another great example here is Goldo. Goldo here isn't really the craziest whenever it came to the free-to-play Ginyu Force members, but on his super attack effect here, you can see that he greatly raises defense for 1 turn, and he has a high chance to stun. High chance is a 50% chance, so half the time, this guy is just going to stun the enemy, and then they're not going to be able to attack him at all, so you don't really have to worry about how good he is, because he's just able to stun. You know, right here, he gets a little bit of extra attack and defense. He also lowers enemy attack and defense for 2 turns whenever he attacks them, and he seals. You know, he has the other stun chance, and then he gets some additional stats for Ginyu Force allies. So this is another character who is really able to lock down your enemies and protect the other units and himself on your rotation. If you're lowering attack, this you can't be hurt. Like, there comes a point where if you lower an enemy's attack enough, they're not going to be able to really do damage to you. So this is another valuable Super Battle Road unit right here. And then everybody else is just there to, you know, support these guys and make the wheels run on these events. You know, Jason Birder, they can help hold down slot 1 if you need them to, because they have dodge, you know, right here. They do have a high chance of evading enemy super attacks. That's a 50% chance to dodge. And then they're also supporting, so they're just going to make the team run a lot smoother. And then Ginyu can hold down the damage. All you really need is someone to hold down slot 1 for Ginyu on like his first turn, because he doesn't really have too much survivability in his base form, but he can stack up his defense if you can get him in slot 2. So if you can have Raccoon and Goldo hold down slot 1, right? And then you have Ginyu come in and do all the damage in slot 2, and he's able to build up. And then the enemy's nerfed, right, by the time he attacks, so he's taking less damage anyway because Raccoon and Goldo did their job. That's the kind of synergy you want to look for in these short events. It's like, okay, who are going to be my lockdown characters? You know, I'm going to need slot 1 characters on both teams, and then who do I have that I can bring onto the stage that are going to be able to lock down these characters with seals, stunning, and attack lowering. That's really what you want to look for in short content, is who is stunning, sealing, and attack lowering. Because if you're stunning, they can't attack you at all. So if you can't take damage, right, that's like dodging. If you can't take damage, you can't lose. Although stunning is never guaranteed, and you typically only get 1 or 2 shots at it on a turn. Well, I guess sometimes it's guaranteed. Occasionally, you'll have a unit with a guaranteed stun, which is really good, like Super Vegeta. STR Super Vegeta does have a guaranteed stun. If I can pull him up really quickly. Right here. Where is he? Oh, no. Turns out Super, there's a lot of characters named Super. Here he is, right here. So this guy, in his passive, he stuns the attacked enemy who's hit by this character's super attack. So that's a 1-turn stun. So if, you know, you're only going up against 1 enemy, or there's 2, and you have type advantage against one of them, or, you know, have type advantage against another, you just want to make sure that whichever enemy you're going to take the most damage from, this guy super attacks, and then they can't hit you. And so all that damage you could have potentially taken, now you're not going to, because this guy was able to stun them and lock them down. That's just, it's very important to utilize those abilities in short content. Stunning, sealing, and attack lowering. So whenever you're building your teams for those events, you know, get your leaders set up, you know, pick whoever you want to be your leader. And then whenever you start filling out your team, you go, okay, who's stunning on this team, who's sealing, and who is attack lowering. And actually right here, you can sort by skill effect. So we can actually do like stun right here, and we can see all the characters that have like a stun in their passive, or you can do it, you know, by their super attack effect, or just whatever you need to help you sort through and find some of these characters that are going to be good for these events. So and then you just take a look at their passive, you read it, you know, figure out which enemies you're going up against, and you can just have success from there. Alright, so the next thing we need to talk about is long content. What works well in long content? Now, whereas I called short content blitz style events, where you're going in and you just need to beat the enemy like before turn 2 is over, basically, long content is going to be one where you're actually in a race to outpace your opponent. So typically the way long content works is as you progress through it, the enemy gets tougher and tougher as you go through. So you need units that are going to be able to build up and outpace that boss as they stack up. So that's, again, another great example for Tech Ultimate Gohan. I'm typing in Tech. Oh, we still have the passive on. Let me turn that off. Okay. If I go back to Gohan here, this is another great example, because he's guarding, so he's already starting off with an advantage, and then he's greatly stacking his defense. So as you're going through an event with this guy, he's going to progressively become more and more defensive as the event goes on, and as long as he's able to outpace that boss, he's going to be just fine and a great addition to bring onto a long event. So that's where the first ability that works great in long form content is stacking, and specifically defense stacking. Just because you want your characters to get stronger as the fight goes on, right? Because that's what the boss is going to be doing. You don't want somebody who's like, oh man, they're really great in the 3rd phase, but by the time I get to the end of it, they're not very helpful to me on my team. You know, you want a unit that's just going to progressively get stronger and stronger. Now, I do want to warn you that you can occasionally have too many stackers on your team. You want some units that are just going to be good throughout the entirety of the event. just because of abilities that they have. So I'm trying to think of a good example for that. Rakum and Gold are another great example, right? They don't really stack or build up. They kind of build up a little bit from getting hit, but for the most part, that's a character that you put them on a team and they're going to be good for whatever event that they are throughout the entire thing. You know, they'll take a few hits and they'll get built up a little bit, but they don't really need to do anything to become a better unit. You just throw them in slot 1 and they kind of are what they are throughout the entire event. It's just a very consistent build up. And there's several units like that, where it's just like, okay, I don't have to worry about this unit. I don't need to worry about them getting 100 attacks. I don't have to worry about them getting hit 100 times. I just have to worry, I just have to put them on the team and they are good to go. You want a couple of those safe characters that you've, used throughout events and you've determined, okay, I know how this unit performs. I'm just going to put them on my team. I know that they're safe. That way I can focus on my other stackers who maybe need to build up a little bit as the events go on. Because occasionally you'll have a unit who's just on the fringe of being useful in a long event, but they're going to take a little bit of extra care and love, and really, you got to really focus on getting them super attacks in order to build them up. And if you bring too many of those characters, then you're in a situation where it's like, oh crap, I'm in the final phase and I've been floating this unit the entire time. Not this Gohan, but this is not a great example, but well, this is fine. We'll use this Gohan right here. You say you get to the very end, and this guy hasn't supered at all the entire time. This guy can be great defensively if you're consistently getting stacks with him. But if you got to the end of the fight and you hadn't gotten a single super with this guy, or maybe like 1 or 2, depending on the fight, this guy could end up taking a ton of damage just because you hadn't, put much effort into him. So that's where you can get into a little bit of a balancing act with not bringing too many stackers. You can bring a lot of stackers as long as they're all self-sufficient stackers like Ultimate Gohan. Ultimate Gohan's one of those guys that he gets like 3 supers in a fight and he's pretty much good to go. Whereas, some of these other characters, it's like, okay, we need to make sure that they're supering consistently. That way they get up to a defensive level that's going to be acceptable throughout the entire event. So that's kind of what I wanted to touch on here. And this same idea kind of applies to Red Zone. Red Zone it's essentially long form content, but it does have elements of short content as well. Some of the stages are very quick. A good example of that is the Metal Cooler stage, where you start out fighting the guard robot and then you just immediately are up against AGL Cooler. That's a great example because you don't have much time to prepare, and then just suddenly you're thrusted into the final phase where this guy's doing, a ton of damage. He can really just wipe your units out. Whereas normal, traditional long-form content, you maybe have 7, 8, 9 turns to prepare for that final boss, who's going to be like the real challenge of the fight. In some of these Red Zone stages, it's like, you maybe get a turn or 2 before you're in there against the final boss, and you need some characters that, can build up really quickly. That way, whenever you get there, you're not just getting blown out of the water. So it's kind of a balancing act whenever you get to Red Zone content. You want these characters that build up, but you want them to build up quickly. A good example of that is actually the 8th Anniversary Duo. They start off kind of weak, right? This unit right here, they start out the turn with maybe 200k defense, just start a turn, and that's all they really have on their first turn. But after they get, 3 super attacks in, they do build up defense on that turn, and then they also build up 30% damage reduction. I mean, that's just like if they get 3 supers. Potentially they could get 4, and they would build up 40% damage reduction that they just have for the rest of battle. So this is a good example of a unit that builds up really quickly, and then they're good to go for the rest of the fight. Whereas there's other units that it's like they don't build up very quickly. And you'll just figure out kind of who those units are as you play the game more, and you'll realize, oh man, I'm on turn 7 with this unit, not this unit specifically, but I'm on turn 7 with a unit that I'm using, and they're not to the level that I need them to be defensively. And you'll just kind of figure that out as you go through events. You'll have units who just constantly disappoint you. An example of that for me is Gamma 2. He builds up relatively quickly, but he's reliant a lot on if he's getting his additionals and his passive, and if he's not doing that, he's not really doing anything special. And that's where, for me, a lot of people are like, man, Gamma 2 could still be in like the top 3 TURs or something, and I'm like, I don't know, I could see him anywhere between, not even on the top 10 or, maybe top 5, just because he has such a range for me, where sometimes he's being really consistent and giving me those super attacks, and other times he's just not. And so you figure out which characters work well for you, and that'll kind of help you with your team building and, just figuring out who you want to bring. So, short content, just to recap, short content, you want to focus on stunning, sealing, and attack lowering, and just wiping your enemies out before that they can hurt you. And then long content, you get a little bit more leeway. It's typically going to start off a little bit weaker, and you just want to be outpacing your enemy. That's kind of the strategy that you want to use is, I want to bring a bunch of characters who are going to get stronger as this fight goes on, but they need to be able to build up fast enough that we're outpacing our enemy, and we're not just getting bogged down in these lower tier stages. Because if you're getting bogged down in the lower tier fights, by the time you get to that end fight, you may not be built up and ready to go for it. So it is a balancing act with long content. It takes a little bit more thought in what you're doing and, who you're giving stacks to. And a lot of that just comes with knowing your units and knowing the fight. And that kind of leads into our next actual point, which is going to be, what do you do? How do you actually approach this difficult content? We've talked about what short content is, we've talked about what long content is, and just typically how those events play out and the strategies that you want to use. But then it's like, okay, I want to hop into a red zone stage. What should I actually do to hop into it? And this is where I'm going to say, first you need to figure out what type of event is it, determine whether it's a short content or a long style content, right? And a lot of that you can get in game. So just for example, I showed this earlier, but we'll show it again. In the Legendary Goku event, if we click on the little eye symbol, it'll show us like the type of stages. So where is it? I don't think Super Battle Road's a good example, but this is a good example. So like right here, the Wicked Bloodline red zone, right? It shows us all the fights in here. So this Frieza, we can see that they have 5 phases. This is probably going to be a longer fight. The Cooler stage right here only has 2, so this is probably going to be a shorter fight. Same thing with the Core, is probably going to be a shorter fight. If I go over to the Legendary Goku event, if I can ever find it, or just any of the legendary events, just whichever one pops up. Okay, Vegeta, that works. We can see here Vegeta has 7 phases. This is, minimum, this is going to be 7 turns, right? And that's assuming that you're one-shotting the boss on every single phase, which is unlikely, right? So you can tell that this is going to be longer content. Again, we're just clicking this eye over here. If you just click that, it, gives you all the event info. And so you can learn a lot about what type of event an event is by reading the information that it gives you. The typical Dragon Ball fans can't read. I mean, listen, it's true. I'm guilty of it, but a lot of the times if you take the time to read about these events, the game does give you a lot of info in here that you can use. And sometimes you just need to see something like this where it's like, oh, this is a long event. I know which characters work well for long events. It's characters who are going to outpace my opponent by stacking defense and getting stronger as the fight goes on, right? Characters like even Bulma, right? Bulma builds up damage reduction as the fight goes on. She kind of peters out around turn 7, but she's just going to keep building that damage reduction up, and she's going to get stronger as the fight goes on. Again, we already talked about Tech Ultimate Gohan. He's like the golden standard, right? For like perfect units that they ever released. We're never going to see a unit like him again. But Vegeta and Trunks are another good example. They stack up as the fight goes on, so that's just good examples there. So that's the first thing you need to do, is figure out what type of event is it. Now, the next thing that I'm going to recommend you all do is hop onto one of these websites. So right here, I have the Dragon Ball Z Dokkan Battle Wiki pulled up, and I link these in the description of all of my videos. So if you're ever curious how to get to one of these pages, well, I say all of my videos, but starting recently, I've been linking them in the bottom of all of my videos in the description. So if you're ever, because I reference them constantly, so if you're ever curious about what one of these websites is, just check my description and we have links in here. So the Dokkan Battle Wiki, we can find a lot of information here. So if I just go to like events, we can go to challenge events down here, and we can find, everything that they have. So this is, global, JP, unavailable. And if I just wanted to learn about the Shadow Dragon event, I can click on it. And then it has all the stages down here. And I can see, oh, Sin Shinron, he is tech, STR, and physical. He's immune to stunning and sealing in all of his phases. He can stun you, he can seal you. Or, I'm sorry, this is Omega. This is the new stage on JP. And then, like, I believe he cancels dodge as well. One of these, yeah, boss disables evasion right here. So you can figure out what these characters do by just hopping onto one of these sites and seeing, oh, they're immune to this, they're immune to this, and, like, they can do these abilities to you, and they can dodge, and they disable your dodge, and, he has, special damage reduction against certain types of units. So this is just one of those things. You can see right here, which characters are banned, what category has increased damage. So stage 1 right here, we can see Hei's Shinron is weak to artificial life forms. And a lot of this info is in game, but sometimes it's just easier to read it right here, right? Whenever it's just all laid out. It gives us, these are the artificial life forms that you can use in stage 1. So, like, it gives you a lot of information here. And then, it tells you all this other good information up here as well. Then we have, like, Dokkan Info. Dokkan Info is another great site. You can come up here to events. Again, challenge. This is kind of what we're talking about in this fight. We can go to active. We can go to challenge events. And then we have all of them listed here. So if I wanted to see the stats for, like, the Legendary Vegeta event here, I click on it. And then I click on this little, like, difficulty thing, and it gives us the stats for every phase in this fight. So we can see Vegeta has 6 million HP in his first turn, and he's doing 88,000 damage on his on his normal attacks, and 220,000 on his super attack effect, or on his, like, actual super attack. And he has a 15% chance to super. He can do 1 per turn. He has a cooldown of 5, and he's immune to being stunned and sealed, but he can be attack lowered. So it's just one of those things where we can scroll through here and see, okay, how tough is this event? And we can kind of get down here and say, okay, this blue Vegeta at the end, he's got a lot of HP. I need to have about 200k defense in order to tank his normals. This is how much damage he's doing on his super attack. But, oh, look right here. He's going to lower my defense by 80%. So, I need to have characters that are going to have defense well above this in order to survive this defense lowering. Otherwise, this super attack could really catch me. And you can see how many attacks he does per turn. You can see that he has a percent chance of 14. He has a cooldown of 11. This means he has to go 11 normal attacks in between supers, which is, good information to have. And then he can also dodge you as well. So this is another good website. Again, this is Dokkan Info. You can see it right here. And this is just a great resource for you whenever you're doing research on how to tackle these events. So if you're thinking about maybe you're like, oh, I'm going to bring like this good, because this guy's AGL, right? So you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to bring a bunch of tech characters to take on this AGL phase. What phase do I need to look out for in this event? And you're like, oh, okay, well, the first phase is int, but the first phase isn't very tough, so I don't really have to worry about it. And then, you're type neutral everywhere. Oh, no, the God Vegeta right here is int, right? How much damage is he doing? Because, if you can't get past this guy, you can't get your tech characters to this phase to be good against this guy if you can't get past this phase. And it's like, oh no, he's doing almost 500,000 on his super attack effect. So if I'm going to bring a tech character in here who can't quite get to 500k defense before I get to this guy, maybe I should consider not bringing them into the event, because this guy could be a real challenge or a real wall for me. So that's just one of those things that you need to consider whenever you're planning out your strategies. And then, of course, here we have the T6 wiki. The thing I like about the T6 wiki the most is just the card layout. I think it makes it really easy to read a character's passive, if you're having trouble reading in game, because I know, like, listen, you open up those effects, and it's just like a brick of text now. So being able to see it all in bullet points and know which effects exactly are active when and, like, for how long, I think this is really valuable to a unit. Another useful tool on the Dokkan Info site, sorry, I know I'm switching back and forth between them. We're back on Dokkan Info over here, but another really good ability that they have is that right down here, they have this 200% leader tool. And so this will show you all of the 200% leaders that a character falls under, specifically for the full 200% buff. So you can know, like, okay, if I'm team building, I can bring this character, right, like as my leader, and I know that if I bring this AGL Goku, he's going to be on their 200% lead. I believe up here, they also have like a link tool. I haven't really used this much. I don't really know how it works. But if we click on it, I guess it shows like their linking partners. And so you can kind of build a team that way, where you hop in, you're like, okay, I want to bring this unit as my main unit. And you're like, okay, who links well with them? This guy right here, they share 5 links. So then I want to bring them. So then you click on them and it's like, okay, who shares links with them? And you can just kind of build your team out that way by looking at who shares common links with them. And, links are only part of the equation. Because, like, this Broly and, like, this Broly, for instance, you wouldn't want to bring in the difficult event right now. And that's why a lot of this just comes with you learning the game and, knowing which units are good or not. And that gets me kind of into my next point of repetition. A lot of beating difficult content is just playing it over and over and over. You guys, if you've been here a while, you know that I do showcases. I do basically the same fights for every single unit that comes out that's like a premium unit. It's like if a premium unit comes out, we're running them through the content ringer. We're going to take them through the red zone. Well, pretty much that's all we take them through now is the red zone. Because in my mind, the red zone and the Birth of the Shadow Dragons event, which again is just going to consider it an offshoot of Red Zone. So whenever I'm referring to Red Zone, I'm also talking about that Birth of the Shadow Dragons event. But if you can take a unit into Red Zone, that is like the pinnacle of difficult content right now. So if they can perform well in there, typically they'll perform well in all other content in the game. So, but you guys know, it's like I run them through that showcase and we talk about them, we go over them, and I talk about their strengths and their weaknesses. And I get all this experience using these units because I'm just running them constantly. And then the really good units I get a lot more experience with because I want to bring them. It's like a new unit comes out and it's like, oh, a new unit just came out. Can I get this Goku on the team? I like using this Goku. And so then I get a lot of experience with these units, and it's like, okay, I know their tendencies, I know their weaknesses, I know when do I need to float them off, when can I float them off, who do I want them next to, just things like that you just gain from doing these events over and over and over. I have 6 years of experience in this game now, or, about that much, right? So it's like I have 6 years of knowledge that I've built up playing this game, and like anything in life, the more you do it, the more you're going to learn about it, the more you're going to learn about your unit's tendencies, the more you're going to learn about the enemy too. You're going to figure out like, oh, I've been up against an example, I don't know. I don't have one pulled up at the moment, but you're up against some boss that you faced for the 100th time, right? And this guy has caught me 15 times in slot 3 with his super attack. So I need to be careful on this phase because I know he likes to catch me in that slot. You learn these guys' patterns over times and you figure it out. So I mean, honestly, repetition is the key to success. And if you just learn the fight that you're trying to beat, that sounds dumb, right? But really, if you just, digest what's going on in each, fight, because you're never going to win. I mean, you can win, right? Because everybody can, there's always a random chance that you just get perfect RNG and things just go perfectly. But you're not really going to win and learn from fights consistently and, win fights consistently if you're not paying attention to what's happening in battle. If you don't know who's taking damage from you, if you don't know, which of your units are a liability, if you don't know, the boss's tendencies, you're really not going to progress well in this game because you do need to figure out, what are the bosses doing? What are their tendencies? And that's why, just repetition and learning the fights are so important, as well as knowing your units, these blue fusions are a great example. You have to be really strategic with them because it's like, okay, I know I'm going to get, on turn 4 or 5 or 6, depending on when you float them off, you're going to get their turn of guaranteed dodging, right? So you need to plan, do I want to get, if I'm running both of them together, do I want to get both of them together to have double dodging on one turn, or do I want to space them out and have, a turn of guaranteed dodge for each of them? When am I going to get the active skill? Do I need to put them in slot 3 to get their dodge? So a lot of that just comes with learning the units and knowing how they perform in each event, and you gain that experience over time. You start realizing, oh, 500k defense isn't enough to tank this guy. I need to use an item, or I need to, just plan better, put this character in a different slot. And a lot of that you just gain from playing the game over and over. And I know, that's not very helpful to tell you, oh, I can't really help you, you just got to figure it out, but because that's kind of what I'm saying. But so much of this game is just learning, right? And some of that you can do. That's why showcases are so important. You can see other people run these stages and you go, oh, you can learn from that. You're like, I only have 3 attempts per day in this stage, but I can go watch, 3 other YouTubers who have, videos up on a unit that I'm trying to use in this event. How do they do? What teams did they build? How did they play the style? And that's how I learned personally. I used to struggle a lot with Super Battle Road. And I started just watching, several people, and Truth specifically really stuck with me just for, I don't know, I enjoyed his commentary, I guess, and, his general play style, and just how quickly he was able to pump out those showcases. But a lot of me learning how to team build, which is copying other people's team builds, and then figuring out, oh, that's why they like this unit. Oh, I see, this unit's really good. So then whenever a new stage came out, less and less times I just had to copy team builds, and I was like, oh, this unit's really good for Super Battle Road. This unit's really good for this type of content, right? And just over time, you learn the tendencies of these units on your own, and you're able to kind of figure out and team build on your own. So that's the best advice I can give you, honestly, is just learn the fights and learn your units, which is going to take time. So Another thing is make sure you're investing in your units as well. You know, a lot of people like to hop into events with like SA level 1 units or like 0% units. Make sure you're giving these guys some love. Get their SA levels up to 20. Get it up to, you know, 10 or 15, whatever it happens to be. Get some orbs in them. Get them up to 55, 69, 79%, whatever it has to be. You know, put some love into these units and, you know, they'll perform better. I mean, that's how this game works, right? Is, you know, they want you to, you know, summon for more characters. That way you can fill up that hidden potential system and, you know, it makes your characters stronger. So, you know, that's in the game for a reason. You need to be investing in your characters. And then another thing that kind of add on to that is make sure you're investing into good teams, you know. Whenever, especially if you're a free-to-play player, you don't need to be summoning on every single banner that comes out. You need to say, okay, I pulled this unit right here. This GT Super Saiyan 4 Goku and Vegeta, who is a very powerful unit. How do I build around them? And so you need to be focusing on like these characters like this, where it's like, okay, I really like this character. I like how they perform. I've watched multiple YouTubers and they all rank them in like their top 10 LRs and they're a great leader. So I need to be summoning on banners that are going to be buffing their team. And then as you do that, you'll get more characters that are good for their team, right? So you start looking at, you know, Power of Wishes, and you just, you know, take a look, and we got the AGL Carnival Goku, the 7th Anniversary LR, Golden Frieza, you know, Orange Piccolo, Bulma. This little, like, setup right here are all great units that you can use on the team. This guy's pretty good. He Rainbow Orb changes, and it's pretty solid. This guy can be okay. They're okay. And it's like you just kind of learn, you know, it's like, okay, I know which units I like. I've seen what other people are using on their teams. Now it's just a matter of I need to invest in those units. So I have this one. I just need to make sure that I'm investing in him, because otherwise, if you're just not investing in your units and you're summoning on every banner and you just have a hodgepodge of random units, you're not going to be able to build a competent team to go into these stages. So a lot of it is just picking and choosing which banners to summon on that are going to be giving you units that you can invest in your current really good teams. You know, a lot of the times you only really need one team to beat most events in the game. Occasionally they'll do category missions and then, like, you know, Battlefield, of course, right? You just need, like, what did I say, 70 units to compete in it. And some of that just does come with time and building up your free-to-play units, building up your EZA units, building up your, you know, Dokkan Fest that you get as you summon and play the game more. But it really is important to kind of pick a team that you like, that you feel like is sturdy, that you see a lot of other people using and having success with, and then investing in a team like that. You know, Superheroes is another great example. If I click on Orange Piccolo, you know, Superheroes has a ton of characters on it, and it's a good team to invest in. So, you know, because you have Vegeta and Trunks, you have the Gods, you have the Blue Fusions, you have the UI Goku, right? These are all powerful characters with abilities that are going to age well. So, you know, take a look at which characters are going to age well, see how their teams look. You know, we talked about Orange Piccolo is going to age well, and just invest in teams that are going to perform well over time, right? All right. And then the last thing that I have is, we're going to go back to the phone view here, assuming it's not frozen. Oh, it's frozen. Well, we're going to go back to the Dokkan Wiki then. Or can I go here? Equipment, support items. Perfect, this will work. Okay, so we're up here. This is the last thing I want to touch on is support items. And which items should you bring? You know, especially now that they're starting to limit items and events, it's really important to know which ones you should be bringing. And a lot of this goes back to what we talked about at the beginning. What are the most powerful abilities that you can have? Guard, damage reduction, and dodge. Now, as far as I know, there's not any items that give you guard or give you dodge, but we do have items that give you damage reduction. I think I have to click on this one. So if I scroll down a little bit, I'm going to talk about the best item in the game is probably... Where are you? Are you not a gold item? Are you like a silver item? What in the world? Is it silver? Yeah, right here. Whis is probably the best item in the game because he gives you 40% damage reduction for 2 turns. This is incredibly powerful. This can protect a ton of units. You guys won't see me use Whis very often, but if there's a new event that comes out that I'm just trying to clear it and I don't mind using items, Whis is my go-to item. This 40% damage reduction is huge for units, and it also stacks with units who already have built-in damage reduction. So if you have a unit that has, like, say, 40% damage reduction, if you use a Whis, they now have a total of 80% damage reduction. So that's something that you can just do to, you know, stack damage reduction on your characters and then give them a little bit of extra survivability for 2 turns. A lot of times in this game, you're going to be in situations where it's like, man, if I can just really make it past this one turn, I'll be able to survive. I'll be totally good. I'm just worried about maybe 1 or 2 units on this rotation, but if I can just get past this turn, I'll be fine. And that's where a Whis comes in, and they give you that protection for the 2 turns, or however long you need. You could even use it back to back and have 40% damage reduction for 4 turns in a row. And, like, knowing when to use these items, specifically like Whis here, can be the key to success in some events, you know. There's not many missions right now to actually clear things without items. So if you're really struggling with an event, you know, just using a Whis to get your first clear and learn about the tendencies of the fight and just help keep it going, sometimes that can just be the little extra kickstart that you need in order to finish an event. So I do think Whis is the best item in the game as far as difficult content goes. Next up, kind of like a Whis light we saw over here, is Icarus right here. So Icarus is pretty similar, but instead of 40%, he's 35% for 2 turns. I don't really need to touch on this anymore. Typically, if I'm going into Super Battle Road, I bring Whis and I bring Icarus, and that gives me, you know, 8 turns essentially of just really high damage reduction. So that gives me a total of 4 items that I can use. So, you know, there's 2 Whises and then 2 Icaruses, you know, because if you select an Icarus, you get 2. If you select Whis, you get 2. I think there's a wish that if you're like a brand new player, that you have to make to Shinron in order to get the full item slot usage, but assuming that you've made that wish, every time you select an item, it gives you 2 of them, right, to bring into a fight. So I think that's still a thing. Let me know if it's not. If you guys are a brand new content and you have access to all of the item slots and it gives you 2 of each, let me know. It's been a long time since I've been a new player, but I think that's still a thing, is that you have to wish to Shinron to get your full item slots. But anyway, yeah, Icarus here, great item. I love to use them for Super Battle Road if I'm going in for like my first clear or something. I know that I'm just completely safe popping a Whis. You know, I can pop it on turn 1, and usually we can finish the fight within 2 turns. That's where I was kind of talking about the blitz mode. You just want to go in there, get in, get out. We go into the second fight, the same thing. We can use another Whis, and then we go into the last fight, and we can use an Icarus, and we're all good to go. So, very powerful item, Whis and Icarus. Another one that I do want to point out is Princess Snake down here. Again, we're just on the damage reduction train. Princess Snake only gives you damage reduction of 30% for 1 turn, but she also gives you 55% healing. A lot of people like to bring these into difficult content, because if you pop both, it can give you basically a full heal and 60% damage reduction for a turn if you need it, or, you know, you can split it out and just get that little bit of extra damage reduction and healing as you need it throughout the fight. So pretty similar to the Whis and Icarus, but this one does also give you some HP. Another great one is the Ghost Usher, which I believe is up here. This delays all opponents' attacks for 1 turns. You can't use these back to back in a fight against like the same phase or same enemies, but sometimes you just load into a fight, you have really bad opening rotations, and the boss is just really bullying you across it, and you're just like, nope, I don't want to deal with it. You pop a Ghost Usher, all of those attacks are gone, and you get that nice free turn to get some damage in and set your rotations up the way that you want them to. Android 8 is another good option. Android 8 used to be a little bit more effective, but he gives you 70% HP and 50% defense for 2 turns. This isn't crazy powerful. This isn't as good as damage reduction, but the 70% healing is really good, and this can be good with the way just defensive units in Dokkan have been moving. This is a decent option. I occasionally will use him. This used to be really powerful back in the day, but he's not quite as useful as, say, like a Princess Snake, just because pure damage reduction is going to be a lot better than an extra defensive boost. So keep that in mind. Android 8 is solid if you just need some healing and defense, but you know, you're probably going to be wanting to go more for the Princess Snake if you have a choice between the 2. Next up for Super Battle Road, we do have Nurse Chi-Chi. Nurse Chi-Chi here is really good. It's kind of like a Ghost Usher, but it's slightly better. So let's say you have a unit that needs to take a lot of hits, but you're afraid that they're going to die, you know, in taking all of those hits. What a Nurse Chi-Chi does is lowers all of your attack or all of the opponent's attack and defense by 74% for 1 turn. So this isn't going to be very good for like Red Zone or the Legendary Goku event where they're immune to attack and defense lowering, but in something like Super Battle Road, you know, you can lower all of their attack, so now they're basically doing double digits to you across the rotation, but you can still get your hits in if you need hits in. So, you know, if there's quite a few units now that build up or get some value out of getting hit, a Nurse Chi-Chi allows you to do that in stages where you can lower attack and defense. Another great one is King Yema. I believe he's up here at the top. He's just 50% damage reduction for 1 turn. So he's kind of like a Princess Snake without the healing, but I guess he gives you a little bit more damage reduction. So occasionally he can be pretty good. I probably get the most use out of him in World Tournament because I like popping 2 of them on a turn. It's, you know, gives you 100% damage reduction. So King Yema can be good because, you know, 50% pure damage reduction, again, is just really powerful, but it's only for 1 turn, so keep that in mind. The mouse here is pretty solid. Reduces all enemies' attack and defense by 40% for 2 turns. This is, you know, really powerful for Super Battle Road. Pretty much the same effect as Nurse Chi-Chi, so, except for not quite as potent in terms of, you know, like, the actual status down, but it does last for more turns, so this can be really good. And then we got 2 more here. We have a new one down here that I wanted to talk about. I believe he's in this section right here. Yeah, the Guide Robot, or Guide Robo, from the Metal Cooler movie. He delays a single targeted enemy's attack for 1 turn. So this is like a Ghost Usher, but instead of being for all enemies, it's for 1 specific enemy. And then that he also lowers that enemy's attack by 66% for 2 turns. So even after next turn, whenever they come back, they're still going to have their attack lowered by 66% as well. So this is kind of like a combo between a Ghost Usher and a Nurse Chi-Chi, but targeted at specifically 1 enemy. So, you know, not quite as good as either of them together, but it, you know, it kind of combines the effects, and it makes it good if you're facing 1 enemy that can have these effects. Which in Super Battle Road, there are quite a few boss enemies that are only 1 enemy. Like you go into a stage and there's only 1 like fight, like 1 boss that you have to fight. There are quite a number of those, so this can be good in those stages. And then last up, where to actually farm these, if we go to events, and I believe it's in growth now. Let's see, if I go to active, right, where is she? Bulma, the Genius Bulma's Battle Prep. They recently revamped this event, and you can get a lot of these items in this event. You know, take a look at which one will drop which items. That's another good use of the wiki here. If we go to, where is it? Events. Where is it? Events. Bonus, weekly, strike. Give me a second and I'll pull it up. Alright, so I'm not sure where I accidentally paused the video, but just to recap here, right? These are where you can get some really good items. Make sure you're grinding these up. A lot of the game is just going to revolve around you getting experience in these new events, learning when to use your items, when not to use your items, you know, which characters are going to be good in which phase of what event, you know, if you're going into a Super Battle Road stage or like a Battlefield stage. Make sure you're bringing characters that can debuff the enemy if they can be debuffed. If you're going into a long content, make sure that you're bringing characters that are outpacing your enemy. And then ultimately, just learn your fights, you know. You can have the best rainbow box in the world, but if you don't know how to play the game, you're not going to get very far. So you need to learn the tendencies of these bosses. You need to be doing your research, you know, utilize all these awesome resources that people are taking time out of their day to offer for free to the Dokkan community. You know, take all these resources and learn from them. One more thing I do want to mention before we go. Again, I apologize. I'm not sure where exactly I paused and I did the cut here. But one more thing I do want to mention is this page. I will leave a description to this, or a link to this in the description below. But this is an in-depth guide on how damage taken works in Dokkan. They have a really nice Google Doc in here. Right here, they have this written guide, so check that out. These guys spent a lot of time trying to, you know, teach people, you know, how does defense work? How does damage taken work? You know, how do you calculate it? And they wrote up a huge guide on it. So if you're looking for a really in-depth guide on how to, you know, figure out, am I going to survive this turn? This is a great, this is a great guide to utilize here. So, hopefully you guys got something of value out of this. This video is an hour long. Again, I apologize. I might have just had like the weirdest cut in the world talking about these support items. But the big takeaways here, again, are Super Battle Road. make sure you're debuffing the enemy. Battlefield, read the units, or read like the enemy's abilities and see what you can do to them. Sometimes you can attack lower, sometimes you can't, sometimes you can stun or seal, sometimes you can't. So those are all things that you just need to keep in mind whenever you're going through these events. And then long events, just make sure you're outpacing the enemy. And then red zone style content, it really just kind of depends on the style of the fight, whether you need to kind of adapt to more of a short event style where you kind of want to be, swapping hands quickly, you want to go into kind of a blitz style, or if you are, going into more of a longer event style and you need to build your team around that accordingly. And again, a lot of this is just going to come from experience. So, you can get all the luck in the world on your summons, right? But if you just get really unlucky with your boss, because, at the end of the day, these events are RNG, right? So if sometimes you're just going to hop into an event, you're going to put all of your characters on a rotation. I may have already said this, so I may be redundant right here, but I think this was while I was paused. So, you're going to hop into an event, you can't decide your opening rotation, you get it all laid out, and it's the 3 characters that you don't want, and you play it to the best of your ability, and the boss decides to super the one unit that's going to KO you on the rotation, and you had no way to stop it. Sometimes that's going to happen. I mean, that happens to all of us. Sometimes you just load into a turn with no chance of winning because this game is entirely RNG. So the more repetition that you can get in these events, the more knowledge that you can gain, the more experience you can have from watching, other YouTubers, checking out these guides, checking out the resources up here. We have the Dokkan Wiki, we have the Dokkan Info, and the T6 Wiki, all of which provide really good info. You can set your settings to like the JP side, and you can go, okay, what banners are coming up? Like, which banners do I need to be saving for? You can take a look at that, and you can click on these, and, you can see, oh, I can save for Super Saiyan 4 Goku, and I can get the Gammas and Vegeta and Trunks, and the Super Saiyan 4 Goku, who's really good. And you can just kind of see which banners to invest in the future. So that's, just really valuable tools at your disposal. The more you learn about this game, the better you're going to be in this game. I can't play all of your accounts for you. I can't build all of your teams for you, but I can give you the tools that allowed me to learn about Dokkan so that hopefully you can digest a lot of this information and apply it to your game as well. So thank you guys for watching. If you stuck through this entire guide, you are like Superman. I don't know how anybody listened to me talk for an hour straight, but I really appreciate all of you who watched. Thank you for all of your support during the 8th anniversary. That's when I'm recording. This is right at the tail end of that. So if you're watching this like a year later, just know that I recorded this during the 8th anniversary. I think one thing that I didn't really talk on a whole lot was support memories, but consider them like support items and just apply them to your team based on the effect that's going to be good for your team. It's like support memories really aren't going to be a make or break thing, but they can provide some help, and they can help take the edge off of some damage maybe. So just keep that in mind whenever you're, choosing your items. And thank you guys again so much for watching. I really appreciate all of you. Let me know if you have any questions down below. I will have all of the links of everything that I showed. Well, not all of the links, but we'll have the Dokkan Wiki, Dokkan Info, T6 Wiki, and this damage guide on Reddit, all in the description below. So if you can't figure out anything from all of this, leave me a comment down below, and I'll try to help you out the best that I can. So I'm going to say it for like the 5th time. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'm going to catch you guys next time.